Because the Wall Street Journal is reporting that this deal with Microsoft is closed. You say a deal ain't done yet. What's really happening?
Yes, Emily. I was told definitively that Microsoft has not, past tense, participated in a round, has not made an investment, but rather that they're considering making an investment. There are discussions ongoing, and the valuation, as you mentioned, would be at about $50 billion. And that's what I've heard from a person who asked not to be identified because the deal is private and nothing's been announced publicly yet. But that is my understanding, that it is under discussion. It is not final.
Well, if this happens, it would mean Microsoft, Google, and Amazon are all investors in Uber. Hunter, I'm curious to hear from you, as someone who worked at Google. The relationship between Uber and Google has gotten a bit tense as they've become more competitive. They're both working on self-driving cars, for example. But what do you make of Microsoft now getting into the game?
I think this is actually about Microsoft's transformation from a desktop company to a mobile company. Since Satya Nadella has come on board, he's made some smart acquisitions of startups, started to put those folks in charge of Outlook, Exchange, trying to bring Office outside of just the Microsoft OS into the Apple environment. And when you think about what people are doing with their phones that they couldn't do with their desktop, hailing a car, logistics, Uber's information about the local grid is pretty compelling.
Bob?
Well, I think it's part of, along the lines of what Hunter said, it's also part of Microsoft moving into the notion of services. And this is arguably another kind of service that's being integrated that they're participating in. Plus, let's be honest, if they're going to be an investor, then there's maybe some incentive for Uber to be using Azure and other Microsoft-based services on the back end. So I do think it's a reflection of this change in how we think about Microsoft, what they do, and the areas that they think are important strategically moving forward.
In thinking about this, I'm reminded of Facebook's $50 billion valuation ahead of its IPO and its partnership with Microsoft. Crawford, what's your take here on this potential partnership?
Yeah, as Bob was just saying, from my standpoint, this is about information transformation and information management. When we look at digital transformation of companies, it's about leveraging your information. And if Microsoft can help companies leverage their information, that's a win for the company. And I think that they are in a position to do, Uber's in a position to do that, and Microsoft's in a position to help Uber differentiate that.
Hunter, what do you make of this $50 billion valuation? I know we've been talking about it, but now it's confirmed. But is Uber worth that? Where's Uber going?
If there's strategic value to the investor, the valuation's almost secondary. We've seen these last few rounds of growth capital, rumored to sort of be protected on the downside. So if you're putting money in, you're pretty sure you're going to get at least that back. Uber's in that phase where you can imagine them doing anything. They've talked about and experimented in a lot of adjacent markets. Of the companies you mentioned that have strategically invested in them, they remind me most of Amazon. They're an algorithm that just churns through information, finds a bulkhead, and then starts moving into adjacencies.
That's interesting. What do you think of that?
Well, I agree with that on one hand. On the other hand, I'll be honest with you. I'm one of these people, I look at an Uber, I'm like, really? $50 billion? That seems like a business that could be, upset relatively quickly by a number of different factors, be it geopolitical issues, be it, licensing types of issues within cities,
John
all those kinds of
things.
From
Greylock told me he thought it could be a $500 billion company. So you've got people on the far opposite end of the spectrum.
Yeah, but if they, to Hunter's point, if they move into a lot of different areas that we haven't really thought about, and if it's about driving algorithms and efficiencies in existing systems, and they can figure out interesting ways to extend beyond just hailing cars, I guess who knows?
Dina, how do you think this is going to play out? Does it seem like this is a deal that, even if it's not closed yet, will close?
I think it's pretty hard to say at this point. As everyone's been discussing, this fits a bit more into what Satya Nadella has had for Microsoft's strategy. It's a services company, it's a cloud company, and a mobile company. And that's precisely what they've shown so far in their Uber integrations. What they've had is, they have Office. Office knows your calendar. And so they feel that it's a value-added service if their voice-enabled assistant, Cortana, can look at your calendar and say, hey, you have a meeting coming up in 20 minutes. The meeting's only 5 minutes away, but we know based on traffic that it's actually going to take you 20 minutes to get there. Do you want us to call an Uber for you now?